No news out here. Welcome to day 3 of baling. This is the last day before the storm, whatever that ends up being. I've been seeing conflicting reports. I got a pretty decent chunk done yesterday, which I'll show you when we get over there. And today I just got to see how far I can get. We at least have some favorable weather conditions for baling. I've got about a 10-mile-an-hour south breeze, which should keep the moisture in that hay, and which should have reduced the amount of dew that we got last night, which means I can start earlier. And that all sounds well and good, but yesterday when I quit baling for the day, I noticed that the baler has a problem when I was cleaning it up. So when we get over there, I'll show you what that is and explain how I'm gonna try to limp it through to the finish. That's what's going on today on Farmertylerranch. So the problem that I have with the baler is this lift cylinder that opens the tailgate is leaking oil profusely. Now the good thing about this is that as long as I make sure that we have oil, it can operate like this, but it does make a mess, and it's just another thing that I've got to keep an eye on. So it looks like I need to top off the tractor with hydraulic oil, and then I think it's dry enough we can go over there and get started. Heavy. The hay that I'm standing in right now, from where, if you can see the bales over there, onto the other side, is the best hay in the field. So I'm going to try to get that done today, because I don't know, you know, I don't really know what the future holds. So I figure let's just get the good stuff in a bale, so at least we don't have to worry about that. So to start out here, I'm gonna roll some 4-foot bales to test moisture, and if everything looks good, then I'm just gonna start doing 6-foot bales on all of this good hay, because I can bale those a lot faster, and I really just want to try to get as much done today as possible. $13, $16, $18. We're getting anywhere 13 to 18, so I think it's pedal to the metal. I've been baling for about an hour now, so I figured it would be a good time to check hydraulic oil and moistures. Quite a difference between the 6-footers and the 4-footers. Pretty consistent 13% through the whole bale. We always figure perfect would be 16%, but anything over 11 I think is pretty good, or at least good enough to keep going. Today's the kind of day where I probably will go ahead and bale while it's too dry, just because I would rather get this baled up dry today than let it get rained on tomorrow and then have to deal with that. So really, I guess you could say the goal today is to get all the good hay baled, and then if the stuff with all the wild oats in it ends up getting rained on and I have to rake it and do everything else that goes along with that, then at least it'll be my lower quality hay that gets damaged, not my good stuff. So you can see it's wet here. It's been dribbling. You guys probably won't be able to see the oil on the dipstick, and to be honest, I have a hard time seeing it, so I'm sure it's not going to come through on camera, but we'll see where we're at. It has dropped some, but not an obscene amount. Get the heart rate up, moving cameras. See how this thing looks. No. This air filter is actually kind of cool. It's like it's flipped inside out basically, so it's really easy to clean. Little things. I have to be extra careful when I close this hood because I've got power for the bale monitor hooked directly to the battery, and it comes out right down here. If I close the hood right, it won't pinch this wire. You can still move it. But if I close it wrong, well, you know, who knows what would happen. Tractor does have some power hookups here in the cab. At least I think that's what this is. But I was told by the guy that owned this baler previously, and it even says it in the manual, to hook this directly to the battery, because when it cuts the net wrap, it needs that full 14 volts, and I guess the only way you can really get that is by having that direct connection. Well, these last bales that I put up were definitely on the dry side, but you know, especially with these big bales, I would rather them be too dry than too wet, and I would also rather them be too dry than rained on. And I should specify, I don't mean I don't want the bale to get rained on, I mean I don't want the windrow to get rained on, possibly have to rake it and all of that stuff. A big part of why I was doing this and pushing it into the dry was because once I've got it in a bale, now I know that these are more or less protected from the rain, definitely from the amount that they're predicting. I mean, I've heard you can get 4 inches on these bales, 4 inches of rain, and it won't hurt them. I myself have seen 2 inches, and that doesn't really hurt it either. But I mean, there's got to be a limit at some point. And I had 2 big bales do this on me, which I'm not particularly pleased about. I don't know what causes this. If you know, let me know if there's something I can do to prevent it. The good news is I think there's enough net on this one that I can still spear it and pick it up and get it on a trailer, and you know, it'll be a good one to feed out in the field, I guess. But I don't know, it's kind of a bummer when they do that. So the good hay is safe in a bale, which is good news. I've still got well, I don't want to call this the bad hay. This isn't bad hay. It's just not as good as the stuff that's over there. I've probably got 2 to 3 hours worth of baling here that still needs to be done. And depending on what happens tomorrow, we'll decide when I'm able to do it. My hope, and what it kind of looks like they're saying now, is that the rain will be so light, if it even happens, that it'll really be the equivalent of like a very heavy dew. And if that's the case, then I can probably work on this tomorrow afternoon or possibly the next day. Or there's a chance that the weatherman's wrong, we get an inch of rain and I have to end up raking all this before I can bale it. Either way, we'll get it done. Well, it's the next day now, and we did get some rain this morning. It wasn't that much. I don't have a total for you, but what I can tell you is it was light enough so that the ground is still dry under this tree, but heavy enough to make puddles in the road. So how does this affect the hay? We're gonna find out right now. Obviously, it's gonna be wet on top. What I'm mostly curious about is how it feels on the bottom. If the windrows are just wet on top, then essentially this little shower was nothing more than a heavy dew, and once the sun comes out, then this should dry up, possibly by this afternoon, but almost certainly by tomorrow. And I'm cautiously optimistic that that is the case. The ground under the windrow is still dry. The bottom of the windrow has moisture in it, but it's similar to how it would feel like if there was a heavy dew. So I think what I'll do, because it just quit raining like an hour ago, so of course everything is wet, what I need to do is come back this afternoon and check it again and see where it's at. The problem that I may encounter is that underneath the windrow just never does dry out, and if that's the case, then I will have to flip the hay over so that the bottom can dry. But at least I've only got 12 rows here. It's not the whole field. So if that's what ends up having to happen, yeah, it's not as bad as it could have been. While I'm waiting around to see what the hay's gonna do, it's a good chance to do some housekeeping, and I guess I'm gonna be running the string trimmer today. Not my favorite job, but there is a prevailing wind from the south, so I can position myself to make sure that all that junk blows away from me, and you know, maybe it won't be as bad. It looks a little better over here. You know, I try not to get too carried away with running that string trimmer. Just a little bit every day. It's a little easier to tolerate than trying to do everything at once. Unfortunately, now that I've finished up, it's starting to sprinkle again, and looking to the south of me, it looks like we might actually get some real rain coming over here, which is not what I wanted to see. That little shower lasted for about 5 minutes, but what you might have just seen is the difference between not having to rake and now having to rake. The hayfield is about 3 miles that way, so it might not have rained over there. It might have rained harder over there. I think I'll put a couple bales out for these cows and we can drive over and check on it. Well, I can't hardly believe it, and you may not either, but I don't think it rained over here. The hayfield is about 3 miles away from the ranch, and apparently that made all the difference. Because when I was about halfway here on the drive, the road was dry, and then you could see on the shoulder that the dirt was dry as well. So I'm not saying this is going to be dry enough to bale right now, but I'm at least feeling a little bit more confident that I won't have to rake it. Surprisingly, it's like really close to being able to bale. If you dig around enough, you can always find a spot that you can just feel is too wet. I mean, I know you can't feel it, but you can hear it. And like right there, you can maybe kind of see that's a bit wet there. Well, for a bad situation, this is probably about as good as I could hope for. And the other good news is that the weather should hold out for the next like week or so. So in other words, there's really no hurry to get out here and get this done, because we'll have sunny days for the foreseeable future. And in that light, I think that I'd probably be wise to just let this sit tomorrow and make sure that any sort of wet spots that, you know, when I just go around and feel a spot here and there in the windrow, I'm just getting a little snapshot of what's out there. But I kind of know that there probably are wet spots out there that I'm not finding. So by letting this sit for an additional day tomorrow, hopefully those will all dry up, and I can kind of look at it tomorrow afternoon and see what things look like and make a decision from there. The good news is I would estimate about 75 to 80% of the crop is safely in a bale, and this little bit of weather that we had this morning isn't going to hurt them at all. Just got this little bit left here, and I think after looking at it that it's going to be perfectly salvageable and we can make decent enough hay out of it. I don't think the cows will mind too much. When it comes to farming, a good tool to have in your toolbox is the ability to look on the bright side of things, because if you can't do that, well, you might want to find a different line of work to get into. Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys, and I hope I'll see you again on Farmer Tyler Ranch.